Thought for the day. To dream by night is to escape your life. To dream by day is to make it happen. Welcome to 7 Minutes for Yourself. I'm Christina Aina, and I'm so glad you've joined me for what I believe will be 7 of the most enriching minutes of your day. Let's take this time to reconnect with ourselves and improve our well-being. In today's episode of 7 Minutes for Yourself, we discuss how to use our natural gifts and talents to achieve our highest goals. Have a listen.
What would you say to somebody who says, I just don't know that I am a leader or could be a leader?
Well, everybody's a leader because leadership is influence. That's what it is. And that definition of leadership has served me so well for so many years.
Yeah.
It's in fact in my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. There's the law.
Great book.
Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So when somebody says they're not a leader, I said, well, let me ask you a question: do you influence anybody?
Sure.
And almost always, I've had a couple maybe,
Right.
I'm not sure, but almost always I'll say, well, yeah, I mean, you have children, okay, you got your family, so yes. Now, it may be a little influence, it may be 8, 10 people, it may not be, but I look at them and say, okay, if you influence 8 or 10 people, you are a leader. See, what people think is they've got to have some kind of a title or position to be a leader. And so they say, well, I don't have a leadership position, so I'm not a leader. Well, you and I both know the position doesn't make you a leader anyway. Right. It gives you a chance to practice leadership. It doesn't make you a leader. So what I tell people is this: leadership is influence. So how do I increase my influence?
Correct.
Because if I influence 10 and next month I influence 20, wow, I've doubled my leadership influence. And so how do I do that? And it's a very simple answer. To increase your influence, you have to intentionally add value to people. This is where it all begins. So, Ed, let's say that I want to have increased influence with you. Well, my first question isn't, boy, I hope that Ed'll follow me. The first question is how can I serve you? What can I do to add value to you? So I'm going to ask you, how can I serve you? What can I do to help you? In fact, what's interesting, before we had this interview, I mean, it was cracking me up. Right. We were kind of trying to outserve each other.
That's true. Right.
Well, what can I do for you? Well, what can I do for you?
That's right. I was just thinking that.
And it was a beautiful thing, because all we were really doing is I'm trying to help you.
Correct.
And here's what I know: if I sincerely add value to you, my influence will increase with you. That's a fact. So we don't need to make leadership complicated. Just go out and intentionally add value to people, and your influence pool begins to expand. And after a while, I'm becoming quite a leader. So leadership isn't title, position. It's all about adding value and serving and making a difference in other people's lives.
In order to do that, a lot of people are going to build an organization, build a team. They'll be in some sort of an environment like that. Nobody wins alone, it seems like, in life.
That's a fact.
I was listening to the story you were telling, and I'd like you to share it about, there's the analogy of getting people in the right seats on the bus, but you have this wonderful story about when you played basketball.
Yeah.
About at the end of practice, your coach would do something very
scrimmage.
unique. This is absolutely illustrates this point so beautifully. If you don't mind saying that.
No, it's a beautiful point. He would have the first team, the better players, 5 players, play the second team. And the only thing that he would do is he would put we who were on the first team out of position. And he always stuck me. I was a number 2 guard, but he always stuck me under the basket, guarding a guy named Doug Roth that was 6'8". Okay, and he'd put maybe our center out there with the point guard. Well, he's put us out of position, and they said, "Now stay in your position and play to 20." Well, what would happen is the first team would always lose. And he'd sit us back down and say, now, did you lose because of talent? No. Did you lose? No. You lost for one reason. You were out of position. And remember this, whenever you're out of position, you're going to lose. Well, what they did is, I'm guarding a 6'8" guy. They just throw a high pass to him. He's just dropping that belt over me the whole time. Sure. Well, you can't. And so it was a great teaching for me that no matter how gifted you are, no matter how committed you are, if you're out of position, you're not going to be successful. That's why everybody needs to find their sweet spot. Yeah. What do I really do well?
Yes.
And on that, there's a point that I really want to make, and that is, I tell people, if you want to be highly successful, you've got to get into what I call the top 5%. Okay. So you got 100 people. You got 100 people here in whatever chosen profession you've got. You've got to be in the top 5.
Yes.
You got to get there, and you can only get to the top 5 if you're in your sweet spot. You can't get to the top 5 working on weaknesses. You can't get to the top 5 if I'm not in the area of my giftedness. So you got to find out what you're good at, because that'll give you, if you're committed and if you got good strategy and all this other, you got a good team around you, then that'll allow you to get in that top 5. And once you're in that top 5%, you're in good shape. You're going to do very well. And I tell, it doesn't matter what your profession is, you got to get in the top 5%. And you can only get in the top 5% if you're in your position, if you're in your sweet spot, if you're in your gift.
Is there any technique, strategy, thought you have in order to identify what those sweet spots are for you?
Oh yeah, trial and error. I mean, when I started, I started off as a pastor.
Yeah.
And so I had a counseling degree. So now I'm counseling people. Well, it takes me about 6 months to realize I'm not any good at that. I'm not. It's not my gift.
Right.
They're coming in and I'm listening to them, and then I say, well, okay, it's obvious. Here's your issue. Here's 3 things. And I write on a piece of paper and hand it to them and say, now go be healed. Do you know what I mean? Go be healed. And the next month they'd come back in. I'd say, now, okay, what are we in here for? well, I've got this problem. What's the problem? I heard last month. You know what I'm saying? Well, did you do the 3 things? No, I didn't do the 3 things. Oh, you go back. Well, it wore me out. I wore them out. I wasn't any good. But that's what I was trained in. But it wasn't giving me the results. And one day, it took me really took me 3 years. One day I realized that when you counsel people, you work on their weaknesses, and when you equip people, you work on their strengths.
Oh, that's good. Oh.
And the moment I went from working on weaknesses to working on strengths, I was a rock star with strengths, because you show me your strength and I'm going to give you a game plan and let's get going, because I'm a natural equipper, not a natural counselor. Yes. Nothing wrong with counseling, it's just not my gift.
That concludes today's episode of 7 Minutes for Yourself. Please take a moment to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. Today and every day with your kiddo is a gift. Enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in.